This evening, as we approach the 2021 budget, we take a look into comprehensive approaches to raise new revenues, help the rakyat and further boost the economy. How can the budget be structured to revitalize the economy, hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic? All this now on Money Matters. Hello and welcome to Money Matters with me, Tamina Kauski. The 2021 budget is scheduled for tabling in Parliament on November the 6th. Finance Minister Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz announced earlier this month that the budget will focus on recovery while adopting more sustainable ways to grow the economy and build the country's resilience. Today, we welcome Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid, Chief Economist of Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, to discuss what's needed in the budget to help the country recover right here on Money Matters. Thank you for joining us virtually, Dr. Nizam. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. So just to get the ball rolling, the 2021 budget is, of course, meant to empower the rakyat and not just that, support businesses, continue to strengthen the economy through COVID-19 control and recovery, just as the Prime Minister did mention yesterday. Now, what is the comprehensive approach, in your opinion, required to achieve all of this?
Well, I must say it's a tall order, actually. If you look at how things are going in terms of the COVID-19, earlier on, we managed to flatten the curve, and now we're having sort of a relapse in terms of the infection rates. So in that sense, it gives us some indications that the recovery that we are experiencing at the moment is very fragile. So in that sense, I think that's where the budget 2021 has to be crafted, taking into account especially those who are deemed as a vulnerable income group, especially those who are in the B40 income cohort, And I think in the recent reports by the UNICEF, they have indicated that urban poverty are the one, urban folk are the one who are very vulnerable to the income shocks at the moment. Although there's some improvement, there's some recovery in terms of the income level, the job opportunities, but there's no certainty that things will get better because of the nature of the shock that we are experiencing at the moment. And therefore, I think the budget 2021 has to be robust in the sense that they need to be bold enough to spend a little bit more. And I really hope they are not really dogmatic in terms of how they approach things, especially in respect to the fiscal deficit, because typically when the economy is in a state of shock, the private sectors are less willing to spend, be it the households, be it the firms or the companies. So the only economic agents that can sort of give some boost to the economy is obviously the government. So I think I really hope that this budget will continue to remain very expansionary, and I think the government has the means to do that and to help the economy to get its feet back again,
I think you've really summed it up very well. I also love the fact that you've already brought up the UNFPA-UNICEF study, but we will go a little bit deeper into those findings later. Dr. Nizam, now the 2021 budget, of course, the four broad themes: caring for the people, steering the economy, sustainable living, and enhancing public service delivery. Your thoughts on which should actually form the core of looking at the sustainable approach for budget?
Well, when we say sustainable, it can mean many things, actually. It can mean, environment. It can mean from social point of view. It can also mean from the government aspect of it. But at the current juncture, obviously, our worries is on the income and also the job, because of the shock brought by the COVID-19, the labour markets are the ones who are very severely affected. We saw our unemployment shot up to 5.3% in May, and it has come down to 4.7%. But still, the number of unemployed person, in excess of 740,000 for the month of August. So, especially those who are the low-income group will be considered to remain vulnerable. So, the sustainability, the way I see it, is to ensure that because of the shocks, the income inequality will not be exacerbated. At least it can be contained at the moment, given the nature of the shock we are in now. So I think the sustainability, the way I see it, providing jobs and perhaps, encouraging more entrepreneurship activities so that people will have more options to deal with these adversaries now. Yeah.
That's right. And from there, quite quickly, Dr. Nizam, the 2021 budget measures are also expected to be derived from the findings of the Prihatin Rakyat Economic Stimulus Packages surveys conducted insofar by the Ministry of Finance. Your thoughts on any info that you've been hearing from on the ground of suggestions or proposals that ought to be incorporated into the 2021 budget?
Yeah. Judging from the response that I've been hearing and also the survey done by the respective institutions, people have been quite receptive, very positive about the amount of assistance that has been given by the government. But perhaps there needs to be some tweaking, especially in respect to the deliveries and especially those who are, may not be able to get that access just because of their, not registered with, perhaps with SSM and whatnot. So these are the little things that needs to be addressed so that the assistance will hit the target, will hit the intended group, so to speak. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Dr. Nizam. Now we're going for a short break. Find us on Twitter and share your thoughts with us on how the Prihatin Rakyat Economic Stimulus Package has been helping you so far. Welcome back to Money Matters. If you're just joining us, we're speaking to Dr. Mohammad Afzal Nizam, Abdul Rashid, Chief Economist of Bank Islam, Malaysia, Berhad. Welcome back, Dr. Nizam. So, getting more into support for targeted groups and a much more core sector, of course, is the healthcare arena, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic recovery. Now, we're definitely looking at potentially a higher allocation for the healthcare sector as we're going through the COVID-19 pandemic recovery, Dr. Nizam. How much can we approximately anticipate, building upon, of course, the 2020 budget allocation that was 30.6 billion ringgit, but of course, that was pre-COVID?
Okay, I think DG Hisham did mention something about 4% of GDP. So roughly, I think that's around 50 billion or so. I think it makes sense because in terms of the pecking order, in terms of priorities, Like I said in my earlier points, is that we are not sure about this COVID-19, how soon we can manage to address it, and therefore it's better to prepare ourselves in terms of the capacity. At the moment, the R0 is about 1.1, so let's hope that it will not go into 2.2 as indicated by DG Hisham with respect to the capacity that we have at the moment. And fortunately, what we are seeing in terms of the capacity, in terms of the total beds in ICU, has actually risen about 90% compared to in March, if I'm not mistaken. And in terms of the ventilators, has also gone up by 97%. And in terms of utilization, it's about 20% or so. So we have that room, we have that space, but we cannot be resting in our laurels because we're not sure when there could be a sudden pickup in terms of COVID-19, and therefore there will be a strong surge in terms of the need to have the larger capacity. So in that sense, I think the number one priority is to ensure that our health capacity is always be there to cope with this pandemic. So I think it's 4% GDP, perhaps that's probably in the region of 50 billion, and that's quite substantial increase compared to this is allocation, like you said, 30.6 billion. Basically because of the nature of the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. Now, moving on from there and to an even deeper look at the more affected sectors during the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Nizam, you'd already mentioned with us in the first half of the show where we were speaking about the fact that, of course, the B40, the urban poor, will be very deeply impacted. Now, one of the sectors that, of course, the UNFPA, UNICEF Malaysia, Families on the Edge study referred to was the fact that many parents in the urban poor community are not able to actually afford to send their children to school, all the way from not being able to afford face masks to even school tuition fees, as well as transport costs, particularly female-led households. Now, what kind of support do these particularly vulnerable sectors need, which should be coming out of the 2021 budget as well, Dr. Nizam?
Sure. I think what we have now is sufficient, the way I see it. Perhaps, like I said earlier on, we need to tweak some of it. We need to do some adjustment. And by adjustment, what I mean is that perhaps the government needs to look back at the database and to really screen those who are really qualified for such assistance. For instance, if you look just purely from the income, typically if pensioners, they might get it, but you have to remember maybe some of them are getting their own financial assistance from their children. So in that sense, they are not really in a better off, but they are not in the worst condition, and therefore this assistance maybe can be shifted to someone who are really more deserving. So in that sense, the data cleansing and to look back in terms of the database and try to find out or try to ensure that this financial assistance will continue to be directed to the one who are really qualified for it. So that way, I think by doing more data cleansing, and perhaps there will be more savings. Perhaps with that savings, perhaps we can bump up more in terms of the targeted assistance to the vulnerable group. So that's how I see things. Because I think in terms of the amount, in terms of the total cash assistance, the government has been doing their really best, their level best in terms of prescribing the expansionary fiscal policy. Just look at the total package, taking into account other government agencies as well, 305 billion. That's like, double from the size from the previous fiscal stimulus when we experiencing a subprime crisis in 2008 and 2009. So that goes to show the government's commitment in terms of pumping the economy. But I think what we need is to ensure that this assistance will continue to hit the target. So that requires a further, perhaps, data cleansing. Yeah.
That's right, absolutely. And from there, in a bid to protect jobs as well, how can we also bring improvements in the labour market, especially for youth and the new graduates, which are going to be a cohort of up to 350,000 new graduates just this year alone, Dr. Nizam? Sure.
I think SOCSO in this regard has been doing a good job. I mean, they become the mediator between the job seekers and the employers who are looking for employees. So we need to do more of that, and perhaps need to do more of roadshows to tell the public that there is this My Job portals that could help them to search for jobs. That's one. Number two, I think naturally people would actually try to think about entrepreneurship. So,
That's right.
So I think it needs some form of facilitation because entrepreneurship is not easy, obviously. You need to learn and you need to understand the nature of the business. So this requires some form of formal training that the government can actually provide to those who are...
Thank you for that, Dr. Nizam. Yes, absolutely. Points well taken. And on that note, though, we take a short breather. And in the meantime, connect with us on Twitter. Let us know what you think of today's discussion so far. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're discussing what to look forward to in the 2021 budget. Now, let's move on to the path to economic recovery. Dr. Nizam, back to you now. Now, I wanted to go on into the pandemic movement restrictions have also accelerated digitalization naturally. Now, how can Malaysia actually tap upon the vast opportunities in these areas to move very speedily up in the value chain, particularly when it concerns what we were discussing just earlier about youth and unemployment and the fact that we've got about 350,000 graduates coming into the market this year alone?
Well, in respect to digitalization, I think the way we adopt it, judging from the internet penetration rate, has been quite forthcoming. It's just that we need to ensure that the adoption of technology will be widespread, not just from the consumers, but also among the SMEs. So this is where I think the training can actually come in very handy. I noticed government agencies like Institute Kerusawan Nasional in SCAN, they have this training for those who wanted to venture into Lazada, Shopee platforms. So I think training is very critical for the SMEs, for them to embrace technologies, because otherwise they wouldn't know how to leverage on this technology. Otherwise they were just using just for emails, just for looking at social media, but not fully utilizing whatever available in there in terms of technological space. So I think training is very critical to ensure that the adoption of technology is much more meaningful.
That's right. Now, at the same time also, Dr. Nizam, I wanted to point out that there are significant new job opportunities, particularly in the food and grocery delivery sectors, even though it's a short-term demand and surge. How can we actually capitalize and ensure that this becomes a bigger part of the more permanent ecosystem, not just during the pandemic, not just during the ongoing MCO and CMCOs?
Sure. That's why I think you mentioned groceries, and therefore I think naturally perhaps, it also relates to agriculture to some degree, especially on agro-food. I've been a big proponent on this aspect because when I noticed agro-food in terms of the trade balance, Malaysians continue to record trade deficits in agro-food, about 17.4 billion last year, and it continued to widen in terms of trade deficits. And if you look at the self-sufficiency ratios in key products, like mutton, beef, they are much less than 100%. I think beef is about 52%, mutton is about 16%. So we are too dependent on imports. So perhaps to make it more meaningful in terms of how entrepreneurship can be embraced, perhaps there would be more efforts to encourage our young graduates to pursue or venture into agro-business, because there's always a demand, there's always a gap. But again, like I said, it requires training, and therefore there must be some direct intervention from the relevant government agencies to make this happen. Yeah.
Yes, very well observed, Dr. Nizam. From there, I'd like to go into the need to build the nation's resilience against future economic shocks, particularly when it comes to extraordinary circumstances like the pandemic that we're living through. Now, what can be taken, particularly when it comes to Malaysia's open and diversified economy, which is quite subject to the current uneven and weak economic and business conditions, making it a little bit more resilient?
Well, there are a few aspects that they need to look at, obviously. But I'd like to point out about financial literacy, because when you look at loan moratoriums, when you look at cash transfers, and all of this financial assistance, it goes to show that our societies are quite susceptible to income shocks. They have not enough savings built up over the years. So I think what we need to encourage is to have more savings, and at the same time to make our society more investment savvy. And like you said, because of the technology, I think there is no excuse for us to invest, because there are a lot of platforms for our Malaysian citizens to consider, because there's a lot of choices for them to choose in terms of investment platforms. And like us, Bank Islam, we have this through our subsidiary BMI Investment, we have launched best apps whereby people can actually invest in it first by using an app. And it costs only 10 ringgit as the minimum investment, and there's no sales charge. So financial literacy perhaps would be the way to go to undergo this pandemic.
Very good. And now, just before we go, Dr. Nizam, I must ask you this. The path of an economic rebound in 2021, as observed by our king himself a few days ago, he said that to stop politicking. Now, how will this actually help in economic recovery, looking towards not just the 2021 budget, but beyond?
Well, I think we are in a crisis mode, obviously. We have a pandemic, and we have economic crisis, and perhaps some political uncertainty. So I think the Majesty that decree, I think, is very important, because to allow this budget to go through, and therefore the cash assistance or the fiscal funding can be enacted almost immediately. So we don't need these hurdles unnecessarily. So I think the decree itself shows that our constitutional monarch perhaps can be deemed as a stabilizer during this turbulence. So I must say this could be a plus point, for our country. And let's hope that budget 2021 can be tabled and can be implemented.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on Money Matters, Dr. Nizam. Before we go, a reminder to find us on Twitter and let us know your thoughts about today's discussion. We'll be back next week, of course, with more money insights that matter. Till then, I'm Tamina Kalki. Thanks for watching and stay safe.
The 2021 budget, combating the pandemic by saving lives and livelihoods. Options to expand and diversify the economy. And the need to be agile and responsible in the government's economic action plan. These and more with me, Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah, on Money Matters this Saturday, live at 5 p.m. only on TV3.